Good morning, Basingstoke. Glad to be here and glad to have you all here. I'm going to go over the life of a security analyst in our adventure, the Ticket to Adventure, a security analyst journey. I am your dungeon master and guide. So we'll be going over the prologue of the story, how the SOC's been envisioned, and those expectations involved with being a SOC, working at a SOC, and being a SOC analyst, and the typical tools and expectations required. And we'll even have some encounters where we get to fight some deep monsters. And these are based off of real incidents that we've had. So the first step is always the scariest. But as a SOC analyst, you're stepping into a role of IT security. And there are things levied upon you, responsibilities levied upon you that you are to help out the organization with. So be prepared to face the demons. So about me. So previously, before I worked at a SOC, I've been with the military for, I would say, 14 years of my life. 12 years was enlisted, working from food service to military intelligence. Then I eventually left the government, or left the military, worked as a civilian supporting cyber operations, whether as a contractor or a government civilian. And then I was like, you know what? I want to be more hands-on. So I jumped out of the government entirely to do SOC analyst work for SecureWorks. So I am an senior information assurance advisor. On the side, I do video game development with the Star Chasers team. I am with the Blue Team Village, DeadSec Pixels, and Curated Intelligence. And my hobbies, as you can see, are all fantasy related. So hence the way how this is formed and my attire. So let's go over the SOC and how SOCs are envisioned. So here you have the way that the military likes to depict it. It does look like that at times. And then for the civilian side, you either may go to this route at the very first, or you go to the middle, which is more like an office space. That's also very common. But now that we move to the virtual SOC, with the pandemic and everyone being work from home, you're still connected through the virtual environment, but you are able to support it, and that's thanks to the cloud services that enable SOC to continue their operations. So let's go over to what a security operations center is and how it fits into the picture. It is the nexus of all security-related matters. It is the hub where everyone receives information from, either the telemetry or the people within the organization bringing forth issues, such as default credentials in a GitHub repository or missing computers. And the SOCs are generally actually the coordinators with other organizations. Say they work with the vulnerability management team. With SOC, we work with the service desk, Active Directory team. Those will be key players when incidents happen. Now we want to look into how does it fit in. So the SOC is the eyes and ears, the extension of the policies. So all the governance and IT policies that happen, it supports the actual policies, just a computer means to it. So the SOCs use that telemetry to see what goes on to the network. And that will come into part of the day-to-day life of a SOC analyst. So we're going to have to look into this little graph here that goes into how the data is processed. So all the logs, endpoint data, everything that's correlated, going from the preliminary investigation to the triaging, those have different layers. And that's where the tier process is talked about. And that tier process, so when they said I need a tier 1 SOC analyst, tier 2 SOC analyst, or L1s, L2s, those actually go back to the IT terms for the IT service management levels in part of ITIL Foundation, because you're still providing a service as a SOC analyst. Now, that tier 0 is the automation. There's been a push to have most of those functions automated. But there's also the tier 1 side, the tier 1 side analyst who takes those information, whether it is from the people that are calling in about it, or the service desk, or even the threat intel. It usually comes to them. While some actions can be automated, there's still also the need to have the user provide the interaction. And then they'll start triaging which one looks more important that needs to go into the investigations. That's where the tier 2 comes in. The tier 2 is the investigating arm. They will go over to prove it is either a false positive or it is something that needs to be escalated and responded to. But the tier 2 has the ability to do a root cause analysis of why that alert happened. And sometimes it may be just an IT configuration. Now we got the tier 3 who are the responders. So they handle the containing / quarantining and pushing for the remediation, and they'll coordinate that update. Now, the reason why tier 3 aligns with tier 2 to a degree, because tier 2 generally comes to tier 3 as the subject matter experts for guidance. So it's not always going to be escalation when it comes to going forth from the tier 2 to tier 3. They'll ask for input from the tier 3 to help them with the investigation, and the tier 2 can still finish it on their own. So that's why there's a bit of a blend between the extended investigation and the containing response. Now, it's not to say that tier 2 cannot respond as well. They're limited, though. Generally, what I've seen in environments that has generally been related to emails that can be contained. But there's rare occasions when they can contain a host, but that's not normal. Everything you do, keep a ticket. The ticket is what says you are the owner of the incident or the investigation. So if you do not have a ticket, it did not count. Because all the work you do, that is your receipt saying, I've done this job. That goes into metrics, which is the dreaded word for SOC analysts, metrics, or KPIs. Now, let's meet our heroes. Now, these are the components that are typically associated with the Security Operations Center. Typically, atypically, in different departments. Now, the leftmost side are the typical side from your security analysts, who are generally your L1s and L2s SOC analysts. The specialization tends to come into the digital forensics, incident responder, and threat hunters. You can count the security engineers as well, but the security engineers have a different role entirely in that component of SOC, but they are still a huge component because they built those detections, and also the SOC can eventually pivot when they learn the environment long enough, as well as the tooling. Now, your atypical side are your threat intelligence analysts and your malware analysis, because those are specializations that sometimes the SOC may have, but most of them probably won't have directly. And from what I've seen, it's always been in a different department, have been either the red team or pen testers. Pen testers are usually external organization, or if it is an internal, it's still going to be in a different department. Each have their own particular skill sets, as you see. The most notable thing about them. So if you want to know the most notable thing about the security analyst, they detect. You want to know the notable thing about the threat intelligence, they attribute to what actor did it. Now we go into the expectations of a SOC analyst. As I mentioned earlier, they are the technical eyes and ears of the policies. And in most cases, if the bad guys in the network, they act as the cyber defense and drive the bad guy off the network. And the most important thing that the SOC can bring to the table that helps the organizations is bringing the recommended security controls. They are the ones that see a gap in the security measures. And that goes into why they must familiarize with the policy that goes on in an organization. Each organization has a different set of priorities that they expect the SOC analyst to know and maintain the order in the company. Because SOC is still part of the security, just the cyber arm of it. And that actually fits in line with the user engagement of enforcing the policy. So there is still a customer service aspect to working at a SOC. So if you are not looking forward to talking to people, yeah, you're going to have to buckle up on that because that's part of a SOC analyst role. Now, the technical expertise, it comes with knowing how to research. So knowing your OSINT, knowing your sources, being able to investigate, having that curiosity, being able to put those puzzles together. And another aspect of it is as the technology evolves, you have to evolve too because new technologies are being brought in like the cloud services. So if you are not smart up on the cloud, that's going to be in your future. Start getting smart up on the cloud infrastructure because that's what's going to be expected for the SOC to monitor and protect. That's just an example of one of them. We've all seen GitHubs involved. Now, the typical tools, you have your SIEM, which is your little pane glass of metrics that are going on in the network. You see anomalies, and the L1 typically finds what looks more worthy of doing a network traffic or worthy of investigating. So it is like this little dashboard here. And the SOAR, which is the Security Orchestration and Automated Tool, it is useful for... Now, it's typically advertised as the one-stop shop of automating all the functions of the Security Operations Center. But realistically, it's mostly used as a playbook in terms of what steps the SOC should be at and note-taking their actions. Because while the various solutions do talk about this is what they can bring to the table, like automatic virus total lookups, that's something we'll probably be doing manually regardless. Now, endpoint solutions, now you've heard of EDRs and XDRs, the endpoint detection and response and the extended detection and response. The key difference of that once the extended has networking data that it brings in, but that's limited. I've mostly seen domain related ones. There are some that will give you the telemetry of the full URL, but that's very few and far. And then you have your external tools like URL scan, virus total, those OSINT tools that will help you in the library. Now we go into the day-to-day cases that we handle as a SOC. Now, the typical ones are always phishing, network monitoring, DLP support, data loss prevention. The key thing, like the SOC's going to see day-to-day in their, check their email, see what tickets going on. Most of the things that typically happen day-to-day is dealing with policy violations. Whether someone is sending an email for that contain sensitive information to their personal email, that falls in line with data loss prevention support. Or sometimes it's downloading an unauthorized software, which can lead to a major incident because that unauthorized software may tend to have malware or maybe a Trojan-ized malware. But in the end, it goes back to the policy violations because that's part of the security gaps. Atypical cases. Now, these examples are pulled from the assistance of threat intelligence that either the company has internally or externally, some services, but website credential theft, so investigating accounts being sold on the dark web, or third-party investigations, which that's more of a partnership thing and making sure the company's data is not impacted by that that lost because ransomware is everywhere at this point. 2021 has been a year. The ransomware tier 22 is going strong. And then stolen devices. Devices get stolen, and the SOC's arm in this is just to make sure that what data was lost from the, like if the computer had data in it that is pertinent to the company. So those are some atypical sort of cases. But it all goes back to having a ticket. Now, we go into the SOC Encounters. Now, the SOC Encounters, in this scenario, you are the Tier 2 SOC analyst working for a financial organization. The important consideration when handling these types of cases are when should you do the puzzle solving and when should you focus on the incident itself. So encounter 1, phishing. The L1 identifies someone clicked on a malicious link flagged by the email securities analytics. So we got here highlighted in red that Yogurt clicked on something from Xeon Fanboy. That email. So, what do we do? The first thing is always do in an investigation is to validate. Validate, is it malicious? Validate, is it, did they really click on it? Mostly the important part is the site malicious? Because you already got the metric telling you that there was a click. Now, in order to do that, you have to do some information gathering. So, doing the surface level, finding out the originating email, either also the scale of it. So, how do you get the originating email? Either the automation tool will give that to you. Sometimes you got to get the email itself from the user, or it is collected through third-party solutions. So, we're going to use the Eye of VOLCANON. That is our XOR SIM rolled into one. This gives us God-eye view into the network that we're protecting. So we got the key artifacts here. We got the sender, recipient, subject of the email, and the URL that was clicked. And a small render of what that email looked like. Microsoft security warning. You have some undelivered emails clustered. Released to the inbox. So, in order to do that, we want to look at two things. Either we investigate the email itself, or investigate where the URL is going to. Because we're focusing on the incident itself and the timeliness of the maliciousness, we're going to investigate the URL itself first. So some internal, always use your internal tools first. Whatever the organization gives you, use their tools first. However, some noteworthy tools that are useful externally is URL scan. Do the search function because someone may have already dealt with this before, and you can use that to get the time of when it probably started as well. That can be useful for the CTI team. Otherwise, you can also use that to validate if it's malicious or not. If it's not been done before, yeah, you may consider biting the bullet and being the first guinea pig to do the verification of the email. And there's also Virus Total. That's also a useful one. Now, always do it in the sandbox. If you are at work, however, do not use Browserling, because Browserling will have the URI that still has the email, the URL associated, which can be flagged by the company. I've seen it happen. It's not pretty. It involves CISO talk. And those are not pretty. Now, in this case, it renders. It renders to a very suspicious credential harvester. The threat has been confirmed. Roll initiative. Now we got the fish who got the lead. and we got the security analyst who has to react. Now, it is the threat actor's first turn, and with that first turn, he already has the credentials, so he's going to roll for being able to crack into the person's account. However, he rolled a 4 and he failed because why? Multi-factor authentication prevented him from being able to access the account. So now the SOC analyst has the ability to make their move and make the remediations before it gets worse. Now the responses. You're in the response phase of an incident. So in this, you're going to be containing. Now, the containment part, actually before we move to containment, we still need to collect some information. So what are the impacted recipients? In this case, it's only been one person who received it. And if you had more, you would prioritize on any clickers. And you can validate the logins with the proxy log. Even the endpoint solutions can get a tracking of how many people clicked on it. But sometimes you choose which ones that are faster. And then after you do that, you do the credential reset and purging of those emails. That was the turn of the SOC analyst. Now, this is actually... So, part of this has been a real response, but also this has been also part of a real incident that had happened. I want to say about last year or so, the Chipotle emails were used as lures. Someone compromised the messaging service that Chipotle uses, which is MailGunner. And that MailGunner account was used to send a mass marketing email to the people that are signed up on them, but it was a phishing email. And that was a very big case. Now that the situation's been contained, you can do some post-incident analysis. So this is the time where you can go back into the puzzle-solving side of things, because this information that's being collected can be sent to the CTI. Now, some considerations: use a text editor. Because some cases, I will actually share a case that I had with, the MailGunner was used as an example because I had to deal with a case with that before. An OPSEC fail on my part was that I opened up the email itself, even though the image did not render. It still sent a call out to the tracker, but it was blocked at the proxy. But this would have been like a big notice to the bad guy, like, hey, either they got some clickers, or if they know something that is more than usual, someone's probably doing some analysis. So always try and render with a text editor. And review offline too, so you don't get exposed to that tracker. And also pay attention to custom headers, because that's going to be important in identifying what tool was used. So a bit of extra credit, or bonus stage. Oh no, we'll call this extra credit for now. So for the extra credit, in this case, we look at the example here for the headers. It was using the SPM and DKIM pass for Chipotle. And then at the very bottom is where you see the Mailgun custom headers. So Mailgun custom headers are useful to know what tool is being used. It's not used for attribution because in this case, that IP address goes back to Mailgunner instead of the bad guy who used it. But it's good to know what tools were leveraged during that. Now we gotta go to bonus stage. So remember that URL that we saw that was clicked on? Well, most of those URIs are generally written in base 64. Either it's written in base 64 or base 64 deflated. So we're going to resolve this to see what it was going to, because that can actually reveal the extra IOC involved with this. So we're going to use CyberChef. CyberChef is definitely an awesome tool that every SOC analyst should have in their repository. Now, if you are within a company, it's probably recommended to see if you can have it in a server of your own or in your download it. That way, the company data does not go out to the cloud. Now, for this case, we're going to put the URI in, everything that began, and then to cheat a bit, I use magic. And then for that, I want to do a Z library inflate. We get an extra set IOC that it goes out to. I'll pause for a little breather. See the cute little critter throwing all my weapons away. That punk. Say hi to the mimic. He'll be guarding my stuff. Okay, now we move to Encounter 2. Encounter 2, hours after dealing with the phishing campaign, it seemed like it was time to rest, but this time the alert picks up on a SIM regarding a suspicious process on a business laptop. So here, you now see Microsoft Office spawning an abnormal process. We go back to the eye of VOLCANON. So research what's going on. You can already see in here the user that was involved, Speedy Hedgehog, and the PowerShell script that triggered. Here's the PowerShell. So we go back to our old friend, CyberChef. CyberChef is useful to help us. And we're going to render it. Do a search. We picked up some IOCs that are associated. We see here that's going out to various domains or various URLs. So it can pull out the file daemon lord field. Threat confirmed. Roll initiative. This time the threat's even bigger. We got Emotet. Now Emotet takes his first attack on the L2 SOC analyst. L2 is exhausted, so he pulls in the L3. L3 SOC analyst gets involved, and they are still called in to support the L3 because we need to know the scope. So the L2 can handle these continual scoping, and the L3 handles the response. In that response, the L3 takes their actions to isolate the host, as well as temporarily disable the user account and notify the appropriate stakeholders. Now, this is something that can be done at a local host level, at the host level, the endpoint, because that one is low impact compared to, say, a server. That would require a bigger escalation, bigger key players to involve. But in this case, because this is low impact, the containment can be handled by the analysts themselves. So that was the response taken on here. Now, I mentioned before about root cause analysis. This is something that the SOC can bring to the table. Now, earlier in this example, there was not Office exe used with the Excel. That was not one of the artifacts. So, further forensics had to be used. In this case, we find out that the person accessed their Gmail account, which was how they accessed the phishing malware, which, if you see here, is a password protected file, and it's doing a reply. This is typically part of the Emotet TTPs, whereas email hijacking with the password. And policy recommendations prevent access to non-work emails. That's something that the SOC can bring to the table. That's a recommended policy change. Now, this is based off a February Emotet campaign that occurred. Victory! So, skill building and progression. So, if you're looking to progress, there are accessible Blue Team training with Try Hack Me, Blue Team Level 1. Blue Team Level 1 even offers certification out of it. And also, John Strand's Pay What You Can. That one is very phenomenal and recommend you take it. Now, some cyber ranges that are available. You have Try Hack Me, Range Force, Let's Defend, and I mentioned the Blue Team. And they even have an online labs range. Now, if you have some personal setups, you can do Cyber Defenders, which has various things such as malware analysis, work with the SIM for threat hunting and incident response type roles. And SOC Veil, which has some personalized VMs, but you need to set up your own labs for that. Whereas other ones. The skill progressions. So I'll close this out. So if you, from a senior SOC analyst to the junior side, I generally recommend that if you do get access to an environment, try to learn it, because some things SOCs are being rolled into having multiple clients, so it's harder to see their environments. Document a process if it's effective, so junior analysts can be able to jump in when they are onboarded. Knowledge sharing is caring, so events like this is a chance to share that knowledge. And the SOC analyst is never alone. They are working with that service desk team. They're working with the Active Directory team, the vulnerability management in these cases. My stuff were destroyed, but that's okay. These are special thanks to the people who contributed the art for the project. So most of the art were custom made. And this is me. And that's the end.